Hello and welcome to Artwork, a conversation with creative people about the joys, the challenges and the mundane moments of living an artistic life. We're your hosts, I'm Poppy Rose.
And I'm Brie Robertson.
And our artists today are Australian animators and founders of Stepmates, Mark Nicholson and Sebastian Peart.
Stepmates began with two mates, a camera and a homemade Steadicam, made from recycled timber and held together with a whole lot of duct tape. When that camera decided to leave the company in dramatic fashion by literally falling off the back of a car, the boys turned to animation.
At its core, Stepmates is the combined devotion of Mark and Seb to make Australia funny again, with animated satire that dances on the line of what constitutes taboo in the current political climate. They have rapidly captured the attention of audiences with their uniquely Australian sense of humour and the ability to condense an oftentimes critically overthought topic to a key statement.
In 2019, the Seven Network, a national Australian TV network, commissioned Stepmates to produce the first series of Regular Old Bogan, which hit Australian screens in August 2020. Most things are still held together with duct tape.
In this episode, we talk about persisting through disappointing times, how to pitch a TV show to a network, staying true to your brand and ideas, and the magic that can happen when artists take action.
This episode contains some strong language. Let's dive in.
Dare you?
Was that a Greta Thunberg?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I need to wake up. I need to finish my coffee because this is going to be an episode to remember.
We actually recorded our very first Stepmates podcast for 2 years last night, so we've loaded the whole soundboard.
Oh my
up.
god! Can you get what other sounds have you got going on there?
I say, make the ball.
What else we got? We've got kids gasping. We've got.
Funny.
Oh geez, that's loud.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, we got this dumb one.
FBI, open up!
Oh, this is my favorite. This is my absolute favorite.
Shut your fucking mouth!
We used this one quite a lot last night.
If someone just makes a big mistake.
We did a really dumb one last night. We did a fake ad read for our show where we were pretending that we got sponsored by Husqvarna chainsaws with the 120 chainsaw, and we got somebody to fire it up in the studio. So we actually had the sound of the chainsaw rolling as we were doing this little fake ad read. It's very dumb, and it just gets louder and louder. It's so
my
dumb.
cheeks already hurt from smiling too much.
Poor
Frank Walker from National Tiles.
He can't stop. Frank,
National Tiles have a
stop
beautiful range
farting,
of polished
Frank.
porcelain.
He never stops.
Poppy, there's a radio ad that just happens all the time on National Australian Radio from Frank from National Tiles, and you just know his voice. He's always like, "Hello, it's Frank from National Tiles," and it's just the most boring ad, but it is so iconic now.
Frank Walker from National Tiles.
And every week he does a new one. It's
Wow.
This is brilliant. It's so good to see you guys. Mark, it's really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So you guys have got a bit of a backstory, right? You guys went to high school together or something. That was the.
No, we knew each other growing up. We went to the same church.
Oh
Our
god.
backstory is that because I didn't live in the same place as you. I grew up in Ballarat, but then my family moved to the Sunshine Coast. But every year we would come back down and see everybody. And I don't remember when you started being at the church, Seb, but you were like a new kid, and I was like, "Oh, he's cute." And and then we went to that like very strange healing night that time, and the preacher pushed me over, and you like grabbed me,
yeah,
so
I
I didn't
remember that.
fall on the floor.
Yeah.
And I was like, as a teenage girl, I was like, "Oh my god!" And and then we just like sent thousands and thousands.
I remember,
of
we were
text
texting for a while. I do remember
messages.
that.
Nice.
We're so pumped to talk to you guys. I have a really clear memory. Actually, I don't know why I have clear memories of our time together, Seb, as friends, and you just have wiped it. But
I think I partied too much in my early 20s, Brie. So
I remember being on MSN one night. I remember you, Seb, saying, "Or if you know what movie this quote is from, then you're cool."
I don't want to hear the rest of this.
Yeah.
How old were we?
Maybe 14.
Okay, I can,
You were like, do you know what movie this is from? And all of a sudden I just felt the fear. I was like, I have to know what movie this is from. Otherwise he's going to think I'm an idiot.
It would have been something like lame and teenage boy like Donnie Darko or Fight Club or.
No, it wasn't. It was a good movie. You chose a good movie.
Oh, really?
The Green Mile, something from the Green Mile.
yeah.
It was,
Was it?
I Ate a Big Red Candle.
Oh, Anchorman.
That's a good one.
I hadn't seen Anchorman at that
Thank
stage.
you.
That was a good one.
Oh, you hadn't? No, I remember that was huge amongst sort of our group of friends, like Jared and.
It was. And so like I watched it later on, but for that moment I had to Google it. So I copy and pasted it and Googled it. And I was like, oh, that's from Anchorman. And you were like, oh yeah, well done.
Right.
Quoting
Anchorman
on MSN.
around
Was
on
it in
MSN.
was it in my? You know, on MSN, how you had you like put a status in your name, like, and then so everyone would put like song lyrics after their name, and I'm imagining that's where it was.
Yeah, that's exactly where it was. Yeah.
I've never been able to communicate in type.
Yeah.
I've never been able to do it. Whether it be text message, I always come across like a smart ass. I used to be a lawyer as well. So every message I send, often I'll use like a slightly larger word than I really should.
Yeah.
It never works.
Yeah.
It's like my girlfriend as well. It was like, yeah, great. We'll liaise at this place. It's stupid. I don't understand why it works, but it reads like you look like a cockhead.
That does, yeah. It's a fine line between like intelligent and dick.
I'm not even intelligent. I don't even understand what it is. I just have a propensity. See again. It's terrible. It's so embarrassing.
But where I was going with that story was that Seb, you were always wanting to get into film and TV. Like you always loved films, and it's just so amazing that you've done it.
Oh, thank you.
To actually have a dream of creating a TV show or to create a film and then have it televised on national TV is a massive thing to have done.
It's, and I still feel like there's a long way to go in what I want to do, but I couldn't have done it without Mark here either.
No, Sebby's always been like fucking incredible at what he does. Like we first met each other at this share house when I was going through law school, and Sebby was he'd already dropped out of film school at the time, but he couldn't stop picking up the camera and wanting to film stuff, and we ended up filming just some dumb sketches around the house. I think one of our first videos we shot was it was like a porno with two stuffed teddy bears from our
Housemates who collected stuffed teddy bears,
and we built this narrative where like one of the bears was coming out of the toilet and then the other one like locked eyes with that bear, and then they slowly start coming towards each other.
It's like a love story, and then it gets real,
and then they start making out, and then we made them do doggy style, and then we did like this weird like fluff shot at the end, like with one of the bears just got covered in fluff at the end. We should just keep
start an animation studio together.
We should do that. But Sebby was always like
it's not
it was really funny because
he was always a visionary.
He was always a visionary. He had 1 year of film school and managed to extrapolate that out into being able to make like industry quality stuff, but really cheap with as many cut corners as possible, like the shortest route to A and B.
Take shortcuts.
But it's not just about short. It's the most efficient way.
Yeah, well, they say that the smartest worker takes the shortcuts.
Yeah.
And like when you're trying to, as a startup or as like a small business, like that actually really helps because there's nothing worse than a filmmaker when you're trying to pitch to a client a video. And it's going to cost them $10,000-$15,000. Like it doesn't make sense, and you don't get those jobs. So we were really lucky. We ended up picking up a bunch of jobs for Sportsbet. We did an ad for Bill Shorten when he was running for Labor leader here in Australia, and he won. We just started picking up all these weird jobs at one of the football teams, St Kilda Footy Club, and we had this weird rig built out of like old recycled timber, PVC pipe, and then wrapped up with sticky tape. And we were filming Eric Banner with this shit. And poor Sebby's the man that has to do it. He's wearing this big PVC pipe wooden thing. And Eric Banner has to turn around and go, nice rig. And it was very sarcastic. Very sarcastic. And then, we were filming this one job for a stand-up, Scott Dooley. Yeah. So we're filming his comedy festival show, and then we were just so tired and exhausted from doing it. We were walking away from the job, and Sebby had put the camera on top of the car when we were loading it up. And then we ended up driving away, and I was sort of driving the car and went, what was that bang? Anyway, fuck it, let's just go home. So we lost about $5,000-$6,000 worth of camera gear So we had to make a
Oh my
big
God.
pivot, and then we turned to animation, purely out of necessity. But what I'm driving to is Seb didn't even know how to draw, but still had this unrelentless drive to be involved in the film industry. Even though he couldn't afford a camera, he taught himself how to animate from first principles, from as a guy who didn't know how to draw. And that
Still
is
can't
like
really draw, but
still
Wow.
so admirable. And then he learned a new way of doing it, where it was using Adobe Photoshop and After Effects, and we did a whole series called Fighting Ice. It's a 50-minute show, and he did that all by himself in 18 months. It was so long that when we first wrote the show, it was called Fighting ISIS. ISIS wasn't a problem anymore. Like ISIS had basically been beaten.
months before the show even came out, there was reports that Abu Baghdad, is that?
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi
That's
had
right.
died, and we were like,
No,
"Fuck!"
not yet.
And then we're like looking at him going, no, it's just a rumor. It's just a vicious rumor. It's just a vicious rumor. He's still alive. He's
That's
still
right.
he's
Keep
still
animating.
kicking.
Let's go.
Keep going. He'd finally worked out this way of doing things, and then we got a phone call from Seven saying we want to make this into a TV show. We made the pitch. We got the show, and I remember having a meeting with Sebi and some the other core crew, which was like there's only two other people in it. And I said, look, Seven aren't asking us to reinvent the wheel here. They want us to do exactly what we've been doing and just do it on a larger scale. And then I think 2 weeks later, Seb had walked out of his room and went, we're going to have to change everything.
Can you tell us a little bit about the show that that got picked up for Seven? And also, so Seven is a national TV station in Australia, so this is like a big deal. It's like one of their like main TV stations.
Yeah.
But can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the process? So you started with a show called Fighting ISIS.
Yeah.
And then where did the idea for Regular Old Bogan come from? And for our listeners who don't come from Australia and have no idea what a bogan is, could you please give some
Yeah. Okay.
give a little bit of context about what this show is about and what is a bogan?
So a bogan's sort of like a redneck. Oh, a socioeconomic, like, rough around the edges, loves a drink, loves a ciggy.
Okay. Is it like quite an offensive?
It's sort of, people wear it as a badge of honor sometimes. Like,
It's now turned into that. It's much more of a badge of honor.
We sort of grew up in a similar, what would you say, socioeconomic level.
The western suburbs of Melbourne,
Yeah.
Victoria.
And so very much like, Dad probably won't listen to this, but it's basically like our dads were sort of bogans. They were like, they're not full bogans, but, we were around that culture a lot, and a lot of Dad's friends were like that and stuff as well. And so that was sort of the idea of our show. And Gav from Fighting ISIS, who was the main character, was like a massive bogan. And
the pitch for Fighting ISIS, because ISIS was a massive problem at the time. Like ISIS was taking, it was the biggest. They were driving around in the 4x4s. They were like cutting people's heads off left, right, and center. It was a big problem, and we thought it would be funny if we had 4 middle-aged racist Australian bogans want to go to the Middle East to go fight ISIS, to just go beat the shit out of them. That's what we thought was going to be funny. And what was good about it was essentially it was a journey for them to learn that not all Muslims are terrorists.
Yeah. So we had to, the idea was, let's start them as like, really bad, cliche racist Australians. And then as they go through this journey, they'll learn the error of their ways, and they'll sort of, have like, as in like all good stories, that, there's a big character change.
And the benefit to that as well was we got to do all the racist jokes at the front end, so that the actual bogans watching it would go, how great's this show? Like, they're saying towelhead, they're saying all this shit. They're saying all Muslims are terrorists. That's hilarious.
And then we sort of flip it and bring them along with us. And,
we teach them a story. And we actually sat down with like a mosque here in Melbourne, and they taught us everything about Islam. Not everything, but a lot about it. And we knew it all. No, they gave us like all these books. They were so welcoming and awesome. It was unreal. So we actually started getting this real drive that what we were doing was really important, even though it was scattered.
Yeah.
Dumb jokes
and fart jokes and all that sort of stuff, and racist slurs.
So the question was, how did it get to? So we finished the show. It came out. Nothing really happened at all. We'd worked on it for 18 months, so we were like, this is going to be, as soon as we finish this, we're going to get TV shows, movie deals, blah blah blah. Like, blew it up in our own heads, and so we put it out, and basically it was just crickets. Like, we had people that have been following our stuff. Amazing.
A bit of that.
A bit of that. People that have been following our stuff sort of got around it, but it didn't really grow outside of our channel. It didn't become like a viral sensation like we were
Planning
hoping.
on. We put all our eggs in this one basket.
18-month basket.
So where did you release that? Where were you hoping people were going to be able to see it?
That was just YouTube. We were basically just releasing content on YouTube and Facebook up until that point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we did that, and then nothing happened, and so we were really bummed out about it for a while. Sort of like I remember like what we've done with Stepmates in the big moments where we've like been really sad. And so the first one was when we lost the camera because we're like, all hope is lost. We've put so much into filming live action. Now we've lost the camera, and now I feel very bad. Picked ourselves back up, did some animations, made Fighting Isis, got to the end of that. Nothing happened. We'd spent 18 months on this thing. And so then we felt really bad. And we were like, oh, well, that was pointless. Like, all right, maybe let's just go back and do little dumb videos again. And so we started doing that. And then we went back to the characters and did a web series with them. So we basically took the main character from the show, went back home to Australia, and then explored stories around his family. And we made, I think, 3 or 4 of those.
I think it was closer to 5, wasn't it?
I think it was 4.
4, yeah.
And then I think it was just about as when we put the 4th one out, that's when Channel 7 called and asked us to basically pitch them a show, which was exciting. And I think looking back on that, the takeaway was all that work that we did in Fighting Isis wasn't a waste of time. It just took a couple of years for it to manifest.
Like,
yeah.
So we entered a film festival called the Melbourne Web Fest. And I've always been against festivals anyway because I feel like it's just a waste of time for us. So I just could never be bothered with them. But we entered this thing and it was great. We ended up getting one piece of media from The Guardian.
Yeah.
And it was like best web series of whatever year it was. And that was actually the article that one of the guys at 7, or the head of programming at 7 Mate, which is like the male demographic channel, saw. So we were on his radar and he sent us a little email saying like, hey guys, like what are your plans with the show? And then we just sort of went, oh, look, we're going to keep doing these little clips. We're going to keep, plugging along. But, we have some visions for this to turn into a 22-minute or a 30-minute show. Stay in touch. And then, the proof had to be in the pudding. We just kept making these little clips while we were working full-time as well. Like I was in sales and Seb was working at a production company in editing. And we just had to keep plugging along. And I remember actually saying as well, it's like, these are so much fun and these are so good. And we're having that much fun doing them. I'd be surprised if this doesn't get picked up. And I think we set ourselves a little milestone of we'll do 10 of these. If nothing happens in 10, then we'll just move on to something new.
Yeah, get rid of the characters, throw it away. It didn't work.
And that's pretty cool. It was 4 in, and then that's when we got the call. And it was quite strange. Like very rarely does the call come inbound.
Yeah.
Normally you go and pitch to them. And the pitch itself was hilarious.
Yeah, tell us about that.
We got a phone call. It was just like, oh, we'll just have a chat. And they brought in the head of comedy at Channel 7, who's this like old sailor. And we were chatting to them on the phone, and they were we just spoke about the show for a little bit, very high level sort of stuff. They basically said, could you turn it into a 30-minute show, 6 episodes? How much would it cost? And I was like, well, we'd have to do some numbers around that. But I think we can do some pretty creative stuff to get that pretty low. And they're like, have you got any ideas? And we're like, we're not short of ideas, but let us put a proper proposal together. And they were like, yeah, great. How long can you get it to us? And I was like, look, give us Christmas. This was sort of like December 20th or something. Like, give us the break over Christmas. Sebby and I will drop some acid over the break, and we'll get some episodes together, and we'll have a proposal for you in January.
There was silence on the phone for about 3 or 4 seconds, and I'm like, oh no, he's fucked.
Like, yes, this is so much fun.
And then they laughed, and then it was like an icebreaker, really, because it was all business before then.
And they loved it. They honestly thought we'd dropped acid over the Christmas break.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of the time, like, no one's really going to talk, like, everyone's really serious, and they're like, yes, sir, like, no, we'll be there with the,
Yes, Mr. 7.
Yeah.
And then, so, and because I was working in sales, I'd learned this one thing, which is just never just send a proposal to someone. No, never just send them an email like a packet and just go, tell us what you think. Give us a call when you've got a spare 5 minutes. Always try and get yourself in the room and try and persuade a sale right there and then, or at least get some sort of next action in the room. So we just paid for some flights. We went up to Sydney. We just sent them an email saying, look, we actually think we've got something here. We'd love to do this properly and come up. So they had us. We flew up to Sydney for the day. We went into this room, and it was like, you imagine Channel 7, like the glitz and glamour of it all. It honestly, it felt like a Centrelink office.
Yeah,
Like
it was
it was
a
such a
tax office.
boring,
Yeah.
boring facility. There was nothing going on there. There was no TVs. There was sad people everywhere. You're walking basically through exactly the same as like a government office. It was really, really sad. And then we went into this like conference room, and there was a TV, no table. And mentally, I'd prepared for a table.
Yeah.
Like it was just chairs. And I sort of made that joke when I walked in. It was like, so what are we doing? We're doing a corporate exercise? Like, does someone want to fall? I'll promise I'll catch you.
And then we had the presentation as well, but they couldn't get the TV working.
No, we'd have to call IT.
For a
Yeah,
TV
yeah.
show.
Fucking TV show. I know,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. So we had this laptop sitting on a computer, sitting on a chair,
Yeah.
and so he's sort of pressing it. And then, one of the producers that we asked to help us out with getting this stuff done, he'd pitched some stuff to Channel 7 before, and he was like, you need a video. These people love videos. They're almost going to expect it. So we made this little promo clip, big, it's called a sizzle reel, get everyone excited. And we were like, so we've got a sizzle reel. Sebi. And then the guy was like, wait, what? A sizzle what? Like a reel? Oh. And then he was like, oh, okay, let me have a look. Like he was just like not interested in the reel at all. He just wanted to have a chat. It was so dumb. So we ended up they basically boarded in the room.
They
like,
did.
It was,
Wow.
when we walked out, like the head of comedy, when we told him what the price was and what the budget was going to be, he ended up getting on, he's like an 80-year-old man. He got down on his hands and knees to look through the budget, which was a very high level budget anyway. It was not a proper one. He got down on his hands and knees and looked through the budget. And when we walked out of the room, we said to Ben, our producer, we're like, so how did it go, do you reckon? And he was like, yeah, when the 80-year-old head of comedy gets down on his hands and knees, I reckon you're in for a shock, you boys. And we pitched it way too cheap. And then we were just, we never expected it to keep coming through. Like we next stage, we were like, talking to lawyers, and we had like contracts drawn up. We got a letter of intent, which means they want to broadcast it. And we had like a few back and forths. We were like, nah, fuck you. We want 50% of merchandise. And they were like, okay.
And every step of the way to our producer, who we'd just met before, like through a mutual friend, like we didn't know him at all, but we just sort of brought him in because he had experience. He was so shocked at every part of the process, because he was like, well, he was like, oh, we'll pitch him and we'll see how it goes. Then he was like, that went really well. And then he's like, we needed the letter of intent. And he's like, oh, you can ask him, but they probably won't give it. And then they gave it straight away. And he's like, what is going on?
Look, at max, they're probably going to give you 15% of the budget. And then at one of the emails was, would you be willing to pay 100% of the budget? And they just went, yeah, fine. Like, it was unheard of. Like, and everyone that we ended up getting this production manager / accountant on board. And when we sent him the proposal and the budget, and she was like, so 7 are paying 100% for this. And we were like, yep. Like, what's the next move? And she was just like, really? ? That was the whole email. Really? Like, you're bullshitting me. This just doesn't happen. And then so it just kept turning over. We still hadn't 100% signed on yet. We hadn't quit our jobs either. And then we got this out of the blue, like an invite to come up to Sydney to go to this corporate box at the football.
Oh, wow.
And it was like by invitation of the CEO. And the CEO was a guy called Tim Werner. Like, he really wanted to hang out with us. And we went up, we watched the footy, we got on the beers, and he just basically like said, welcome to the family.
Holy
so
moly.
we both went to work again the next day and quit our jobs. And then I think it was a couple of weeks later, we had to start. And we had nothing. We told them we had a studio built out the back. We were ready to go. We didn't.
One of our animators, on the first day, he came into work and there was no computer. And so we're like, oh, maybe you could just use a couple of pieces of paper, start sketching out the characters, like,
We used to record on an ironing board with like foam on it that we'd gotten. Like, so when we then had to like build this studio out in the back of our shed, and we're renting here as well, so we couldn't just build a studio. We had to build a studio that could leave eventually. We got a carpenter friend of ours to pull a few favors, and we got a bunch of timber, and there was a primary school down the road that was we found out we stole a bunch of offcuts of soundproofing from one of the guys was working there as a trade. He was like, there's a bunch of soundproofing here, boys, come and get it. We built this little black box at the back of our shed. We had no accountants, no lawyers. We had to basically here's the reality of it. We had to incorporate a company just to sign the contract like the night before.
Wow.
Like they were sort of just to put the ABN number on it that we had to incorporate the night before.
Wow.
It was so dumb. So that's how far back, and we sort of took stock because the whole timeline and budget was based on like every day had to go perfectly. Everything, there was no fuck up room whatsoever in the whole schedule. And on day one, we probably estimate that we were about 3 months behind. When we signed the contract, everyone was saying, "Oh, congrats, well done," and we're like, "Fuck, we can't believe this! Like, we're terrified." And then internally, everyone was like, "Don't cream your jeans yet, boys. Like, it hasn't happened yet," because it was a milestone agreement, so they don't just give you the whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And then the first script, which was due 1 week after we officially started, which we hadn't written yet. So we had 1 week to write this script, and there was like $100,000 writing on this one script. And we ended up writing it in 6 days and sending it over, and we called it Spoof Creek, and it was like a parody on Wolf Creek.
Yeah.
Ivan Milat or Mick Taylor getting his dick shot off. What else was in that
Wow.
episode? Like we had a police officer getting his head exploded. One of the lines in the script was like the police officer pulls him over, taps on the windscreen, and then in capital letters and in bold, then his fucking head explodes. And they approved it. Like we sent it to our production manager, and she was like, "They are not going to approve this. This is awful."
Oh my
and they
God.
approved it.
They loved it.
It was so dumb.
Yeah, and they just kept saying yes.
And they just kept saying yes.
That's
and then
amazing.
we eventually we got stuck towards the end. We went up for what's called a green light meeting with the big wider network, and it was like you pitch to a small amount of people, and then when it comes to the green light meeting, you bring in PR and marketing and sales and all the promo guys and the wider network all come together, and they get to meet the creators and they get to learn about the show. And we were supposed to have finished episodes 1, 2. We were supposed to be halfway through episode 3. We hadn't even finished episode 1 yet by this stage. So we knew that things were in a bit of strife. But we went up for this meeting and we showed them whatever we could. We sort of glossed over a few things, and they turned around and they were like, "So, how's the timeline looking? Looking good?" Looked at each other and went, "Yep, yeah,
Yeah,
no,
it's
looking,
fine.
it's
Yeah,
great.
absolutely,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
we're right on track. Might even deliver early, to be honest."
Oh.
And they were like, "Oh, cool. So, are you happy for us to start running promos?" And we were like, "Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, why not?
Run some promos.
Promo's good.
Sounds fucking awesome. Yeah. We'll get you whatever you need. Like, we'll get you whatever you need." And then I think it was 2 weeks later, we were watching like an ad on television that was just like, "Regular Old Bogan coming soon."
We gave them everything we'd animated, and they started running ads, and we're like, wow, there is like 95% of the show left to animate, and you guys are saying coming soon.
We are nowhere near finished. So it's terrifying because it was very personal because it was just Seb and I.
Yeah.
We had no one to blame either. We couldn't
Yeah, we couldn't
turn
say
around
anyone
and say,
else
oh, it's the
fucked up.
studio's fault. Or
So we ended up having to come clean a couple of months later when they were like pushing for final episodes. They were like, "When do we start getting final episodes?" And we just kept sort of deflecting the question for as long as we could. And then we sort of had to send an email, "Look, the jig is up. We probably have to have a call." We handballed it to one of our producers, and we were just like, "You call them."
to be fair, he loves that stuff.
He
Like
loves
we didn't force him to do it. He was like,
Loves
yeah, I love
talking to
that.
network.
Yeah.
And he said, when he said, "Oh, look, the boys are going to be late," and the executive producer at Channel 7, the head of comedy, apparently there was about 45 seconds of silence.
No.
And then apparently the quote was, he turned around and said, "Where's my fucking cartoon?" And then we jumped on a phone call the next day, and it was completely blown over. We apologized profusely and said, "Look, we just need a little bit of time." Unfortunately, time is money, guys. So I don't know if you're able to kick around the can, rattle the can a little bit around the office at 7, but we could do with a little bit of extra cash. And they turned around and said, "Look, we don't care where you're getting the money, but it ain't from us. There's no money here." And we're like, fuck, okay. We'll deal with it. We were looking at, it was about $60,000 worth of like it was about -60. That was the budget. We were going to blow out by about $60,000.
Whoa.
Like if we go into debt, that's
And we
us.
said, look, it's probably worthwhile. We both, we pounded fists on it. We were like, let's just go ahead. Let's just do it. It might be worth it. Like we'll have a show delivered on national telly. That'll be good enough. That'll be worth it. If we have to get a loan for 30 grand each, so be it. That being said, there was no way we were going to get a loan for 30 grand. We were just going to be in 30 grand worth of debt, and the business was going to go bankrupt, and we were going to have to try and start again. But then COVID hit. And all the government stimulus came through for small business, and just so happened to get us about 75K.
So we qualified and then made a little bit more.
So we were actually going to put in the special thanks of the show. It was like special thanks to the CCP and to the guy that ate the bat in Wuhan, because if it wasn't for those guys, we would be in a horrific amount of debt.
Hello.
Hello.
It's your Artwork podcast hosts briefly interrupting this episode. We hope you're enjoying this conversation and feeling really inspired by this story.
We'd just like to remind you that the Artwork podcast is a completely independent project, and we'd really appreciate your help in spreading the word. You can support us by subscribing, leaving a comment or review, and sharing the podcast with your friends.
We'd also like to invite you to take part in the Artwork conversation by joining our Artwork Community Facebook group. There, you will be able to connect with the artists we have featured on the podcast and share your journey with like-minded creatives.
We can't wait to see you there. Let's get back to the conversation.
Thank you.
I just feel like for you guys, so much has just fallen into place. And
It is dumb luck. That's
It's
all it
dumb
is.
luck,
It's dumb luck.
Absolutely.
If the one guy at Channel 7 didn't read the one article that was written about our dumb web series, and he wasn't, so our strategy was, we'll post stuff online and then people will see it. And the head of 7 Mate at the time doesn't use social media, is like just off technology. And for like just some off chance happened to be reading this article.
Wow.
Yeah. But you'd never expect, right? You'd never expect
No.
you always think if you make a viral video that's
That's
how
it,
you'll get into telly.
Yeah.
That's how you'll
Yeah.
I'll say he's got, doesn't have Facebook, Instagram, doesn't have any of it, doesn't even have LinkedIn, and he's like, he's the head of
guy.
the programming. He's
Yeah.
the head of the
How
channel.
do you get to him? You write a book or something? I don't know.
Yeah, you got to write a book.
I'm doing the Artist Way at the moment, which is like a 12-week just kind of self-reflection as an artist and like doing lots of writing and stuff. And one of the weeks that I've just done was kind of talking about synchronicity and how when we take action, even if we don't know where that action's going to go, somehow magic happens. And that, like, yes, we could have this big idea of creating a TV show and you can stress and go like, how is it going to happen? But the fact that you guys, like, you lost your camera, you still kept going, you posted stuff, you put it in the festival. It's like you did make these actions, whatever other force is working kind of met you there. And I just think that's so cool.
And I think a big part, because I'm a big believer in synchronicity, and I think a big part of it too is to know when you're feeling shit and when you're down in the dumps. Like, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like when we finished fighting ISIS and we were down in the dumps, it's like we just couldn't see that, a year or two in the future we'd be making a TV show with these characters.
Yeah.
But, so it's like when we had the same thing when the show ended as well, like it got pretty the network were disappointed with the ratings. They thought it would be a lot bigger than it was. And so therefore we were disappointed, but then we sort of reminded ourselves, well, the same thing happened last time. We did a massive project. We got to the end of it and then, there's just crickets and nothing else is happening. But you got to remember, in 2 or 3 years, who knows?
You never know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, and I find that, like, at the end of a big project, or like the end of our tours that we did, you do, because you've been working so hard and on this kind of like high and going uphill, and everything was exciting and new, and then when it's over and when you stop, like, what goes up must come down.
Exactly,
And I think it's
yeah.
just inevitable as being an artist and working in a creative industry, that after you've done the cool thing, like, you're not going to stay up there forever. Like, it's going to be ups and downs, and you've just got to figure out when you do fall down into these lower, like, more sad places, like, you can absolutely build your way back up
Yeah.
to having the high energy again. But it's just part of being an artist, I think.
And also being an artist as well is once you've done it once, you don't want to just do the same thing again, because as an artist, that's just not what you want to do. You always want to make it better.
Push the envelope.
So that feeling of when you're in something and you're like, I don't know if I can do this, that's got to be normal. Otherwise, you're just recreating the same thing over and over again, and that's kind of boring and shitty.
Yeah.
So I think that's something I've learned after Bogan, is that there will never be a project where I feel like
Everything's going well.
I am willing, able, this is easy. I can do this. This all is well. It's just always going to be there's at least going to be times where you just want to throw your head into the wall.
That's so true. If it's too easy, then yeah, what are you doing? You're not growing, you're not expanding. And that's so true. When I look back on all the creative projects I've had, I constantly feel like I am treading water. I constantly feel like I don't know how it's going to happen.
I feel like that's how you know you're making something good, or at least you've got to be pushing yourself. Like that's all you can do. And if you keep doing that, you by default you're going to fall upwards. Even if you somehow make every mistake along the way, at least if you do, you've made it to that next point, or at least you've had a crack at it. And that was our theory when we were staring at the debt. It was like, well, even if all else fails, we'll at least be able to turn around and say that we delivered. And we had a meeting last week with a US production company about doing some animation work for those guys, like for the States, which would be fucking incredible because it's a much bigger market and there's a lot more money over there. And what was really amazing is not once did they ask us about any sort of proof of delivery. There was never a chat about our capability, our infrastructure, our pipeline. There was none of that. All they gave a fuck about was our ideas. And
Yeah, that was
pretty
nice.
awesome.
Even
Like,
if the
that's
show did nothing, like just to be able to say that is pretty cool.
even though we have no idea what we're doing still.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about like the content that you talk about and where those ideas come from. The topics that you cover in Regular Old Bogan, you've said are quite taboo, and you want to use comedy. You want to make Australia funny again. I'd love to hear your perspective on like why you choose the topics you do and how you see comedy as a way to discuss those topics in a way that maybe we can't do normally.
I don't think we try and find this. We're not looking for the taboo subject. We're looking for a subject that has something in it. And I don't know how you'd explain that something exactly, but it's something that sort of excites us a little bit. And it feels like going around maybe like a desert or something and you find like a well, and we want to find like an idea that's basically the well that you can just keep drawing water out of. And so we get that with sort of like, I'm trying to think of an episode that we've done that was like that. We did, like, for instance, we had one episode where it was Gav takes on the mammals, so middle-aged men in Lycra, and they're like, the middle-aged guys that ride around and cycle and wear the, tight Lycra, and you can see sort of the bulge.
You see a little bit too much.
It's that tight. A little bit too much. And so we had this idea that, what if they were like a bikie gang? And so they're actually like, you see them riding around everywhere, but they're actually, delivering drugs, or they're going to, go beat down someone. And I think when we came up with that idea, it's like, oh, wow, there's so many different angles you could come at that from. And it's like finding those ideas are the more exciting ones. And I think just more often than not, they hit upon taboo subjects just because we're a little immature, maybe. I don't know, but
and I think there's a part of the architecture of sort of it's the Dan Harmon model of writing as well, where you want a character to go through. Was it the
hero's journey? Yeah.
In terms of a circle, you've got like two halves of the circle, and one half can be ignorance, and the other one can be knowledge or enlightenment. And by default, if you've got a character who for half of the story is ignorant, by default, you're almost going to be touching on those taboo subjects.
So like in Fighting ISIS, where the character was racist at the start, and then it was basically racist, not racist, or ignorant,
racist, and then they have something happen, and then their journey home is not racist. And like that's kind of simplified, but it is the same. It's like even in that mammals episode is just like all middle-aged men who are in Lycra are wankers and they don't deserve to be on the road. And then he slowly starts coming around that maybe not all cyclists are assholes, and
But-
maybe we're all just road users and we need to get along. Like, and basically all of the episodes, and I think that's just naturally what Sebi and I are really interested in, because we like to think of our opinions and our thoughts to be just like a t-shirt that you've worn like from 5 years ago. Like, I'm not so attached to my opinions. Not every one of my opinions or beliefs are so rigid that they never ever change. Like I'm pretty malleable. So it is that kind of like, I can't believe I wore that 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's, going back and looking at the dialogue in Fighting ISIS, it's like, oh, that's really cheesy. Like, we believe that was a good line.
Yeah,
we
thought
believe that was a good thing to say.
And it's the same. And I think a lot of people would be better served by not being so, because it's almost like a conservatism. It's like, I've believed this my entire life. Just means that you're never open to alternative thought, and you've got to be. And that's what we kind of like to play in, because there's a lot of Australians and there's a lot of people in the world that are just so stuck in their ways. And to me, that's hilarious. And Gav, who's our main character, his surname's Stubbs, but that's also a play on his main character trait in that he's stubborn. So he's unrelentless, and that's what we find really funny. It's almost his superpower. But he's also ignorant, so he can be super wrong, but just so dead set and headstrong, and just go at it at 100 miles an hour. And that just sort of lends itself to a lot of comedy as well.
So you need to launch a car into space?
Yeah, do you reckon you could give us a hand?
Yeah, mate. Piece of piss. What's your time frame?
Nah, I told the bloke I'd get it done by tea time.
Ooh. Yeah, I'll have to pull my finger out, but no dramas.
So what are you thinking? A giant slingshot or a cannon?
Nah, mate. Stand by.
Whoa! Where the fuck did you get a rocket?
Yeah, that there's the rocket from back when we fought ISIS.
Huh?
Remember when we saved the MCG from a terrorist attack on Grand Final Day?
Vaguely.
Anyway, towed her out of the Yarra, gave it a spot weld, full tank of two-stroke. She's ready to launch. All we need some tow rope and a car.
Fuck! I just gave my car back. Reckon you could teach me how to hotwire a Hilux?
You're gonna love Hog's Breast, Sal. It's a real fancy schmancy sort of establishment. They've got local steaks and beef ribs, and they've even got curly fries, Sal. And the best bit is I've even got the Hilux back, so why don't you come on out and... Where's my Hilux? Oh, wait, there it is.
Fucking told you I'd launch a car into space.
You know what, Dad? That's actually pretty impressive.
No. It's pretty easy when you know how, mate. Your old man's a fucking genius.
How'd you calculate the trajectory?
What the fuck's a trajectory? Well, let me just look at his chart here. On the back of all these scans, I'd say Timmy has officially gone into remission. He can go home today.
Dad, you just blew up the Royal Children's Hospital!
Me? No way! I had nothing to do with it!
I just saw it!
No, I'm just a regular old bogan.
You just murdered hundreds of sick kids.
You can't prove anything, dickhead. Where would I get a rocket, huh? You fucking idiot! Now get inside! It's tea time! I'm fucking starving! Stay!
I've always been someone that, doesn't want to... I love having really good discussions with people, but I'm very careful about like putting my point of view or putting my ideas too heavily on the table in case like people get offended or something like that. And I'm getting better at it, but I just find comedy so impressive that like you guys just can't hold back. You're writing content and you're telling jokes that probably a lot of people just don't understand, or they might be like,
are you allowed to say that?
Yeah. We have fights with some of our friends sometimes over our views, I think, because they just seep into everything we do, and it's hard not to. It's hard. You don't want to be too. I don't know. I guess some art can be like overtly political, like you get bands like Rage Against the Machine and protest bands and stuff. But at the same time, I think comedy is a bit different. You don't want to be too ideological. You don't want to be pushing too hard in one direction, because then it's all about making fun of both sides.
Okay.
Well, comedy's also a weird thing. Is it's so confronting, and this was something I had to deal with coming out of uni as well. Was saying that you want to work in comedy is kind of like standing in front of everyone and saying I'm beautiful. It's so confronting. I'm standing there trying to tell you I'm funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. But like
That's funny. That's comedy.
funny. But yeah, no, it's
Have you ever had a part on the artwork podcast ever?
No.
A warning at the start of this, like
there
Yeah,
will be
we'll
farts.
put a little trigger warning in case people
Warning,
don't
We're
like.
sorry. We're sorry.
You started off writing, for YouTube and you were in control of like, everything at that point, the time schedule, what you were saying and everything, and like what the episodes were about. But like, what's the difference of like, or how did you find writing for when you knew it was going to be on TV? And like, did you take a different approach to that, to what you were doing before when it was just you guys and doing it for the fun of it?
The only thing would be the constraints, like there's got to be an ad break every 4 to 7 minutes, and it has to be 22 minutes and 30 seconds exactly, or between 22 minutes and 22:30.
Yeah, that was confronting. And the only other, like Seven were actually, to their credit, they actually didn't hold us back a great deal. In fact, they wanted us to go further.
Wow.
They wanted us to be more shocking, and we actually had to push back on that because we didn't want to be just
Shock jocks.
being shocking is actually really easy. It's really easy to get people to go,
How dare you?
because but it's really hard to wrap that up with a bit of narrative and try and make a decent story out of it. And that's what we always thought the show was. And unfortunately, we did get advertised as, the show that's worse than South Park.
Yeah, which
The
is
show that'll make
terrible.
South Park blush. And we're like, fuck, don't do that to us, please. Like, it's not actually what the show is. But the only constraint we had was we weren't allowed to use brand names, which was fair because anytime we've used brands in the past, we've been either sued or threatened to be sued. Like with Jim's Mowing. Do you remember Jim's Mowing, bro?
Yes, of course.
We did a video about Jim's, and we actually got a phone call from Jim himself.
Oh my god.
And it was like, told us that he was going to make our lives a living hell. He was going to sue the pants off us.
So Jim's a massive.
It started off as a
massive-
mowing company, and then he
I think he's in the
grew into
UK,
a
actually.
massive franchise.
What would your advice be for people who are currently in that maybe writing and creating stage right now? Where could they start? And obviously, like, every path is different. But in your mind, like, what would you suggest for people who are just getting started?
Just make stuff. Don't just do an outline and a script. Actually finish the script, and then
Shoot the script.
shoot the script, and then drop it and move on to the next thing, and keep getting better. And if you've got a series idea, do 10 of them before you move on. See it through. Even us who have had a crack at telly now as well, it's like, I don't know if we really are that inclined to want to keep doing television, to be honest. Australian television, and I'm sure it's like that all around the world, it seems that they have no real long-term strategy. They keep doing sort of the same old tricks over and over again. And, it's no secret as well that Channel 7 have a massive problem with solvency.
Yeah, right.
And they somehow believe that their little app that they've got so you can watch normal TV on your phone is going to be able to compete with the Netflix and the Prime and Stan here in Australia. They're just not going to. And unfortunately, they're not really putting a lot of emphasis in content to try and get to that point either. We were sort of an outlier there. That was like their shot at it. They were trying to draw internet viewers back to regular telly, but it's really hard. Like, our show ran 15 minutes late on the first night.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were like, this is crazy. Like, I should never have to wait 15 minutes for a show to start. I normally, like, there's a Netflix button on my remote at home. I press the button, boom, I'm on. Like, I've got it straight away. So the internet is a complete equalizer. All you've got to do is just keep making stuff, and eventually you'll find a market. And then you've just got to keep serving that market and just keep getting better. And eventually eventually, if what you're doing is actually providing value, and if that's where you come from as a core principle, you're trying to provide value, whether it be entertainment or education, or porn, it's going to go off at some point. Do you know what I mean? Like if you start from value and you're giving something of value to the audience, they will come.
Yeah.
And that's what we've had to do. Even after all this, like we were talking about it before, you break it down and we went, right, we're going to pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off. What's next? And that's where it comes from. You got to go, well, how can we provide the most value out there and, be happy doing it?
And where do you think you will head next? Where are your sights set now?
Well, we're going to pitch this to the US company, just try and pitch some formats over there. But at the same time, we've started up our podcast again, and we just love doing online stuff because there's no end game to it. It's just fun to do, and it's as you guys know, like podcasts, they cost so little, and you get so much out of them. Like you get an hour of content, and it takes you an hour to make. Like there's nothing else in the world like that.
Yeah.
So we're excited to do that. We're going to do a couple of little videos online and keep chipping away at the animation side of things and see where we go.
And we'd never written for a commercial 30-minute show before. We told them that we had. We've got a bunch of scripts that we've written that are like 30 minutes long, guys. We know how to write 30 minutes. We'd never written one in our lives. We've written like a 50-minute web series, but that's not the same. And other than that, we'd written like 8-minute long little sketches online. So we know how to write for 30 minutes now. And we know how much goes into a TV show. So it was what we were talking about before. It's just now we've got to build on that, try and get it better, try and supercharge that. And it's going to, and that's just going to be our next journey. And that's that falling upwards thing. You're always going to be the next step above. It's just the natural progression of the way things go. So we're going to try and pitch some more TV stuff, but we're going to come at it from a very different angle, which is not please give us a show, but more like this is the show that we can make or that we think we can make, and it's about building it, getting it back to first principles and what's the show that we really, really want to make again. And we just had a ripper little writers camp actually with we got like 6 of our mates together who we're now bringing in as a part of the company, and we booked this 7-story castle / tower here in Kew, which is an old mental asylum. Which was so whack. And we came up with these crazy ideas, and we're just really excited to shop them around, because we know what to do now, and that's what we're pretty lucky to have that skill set. So we just want to keep doing that. But at the same time, it's all about the fart jokes. And hopefully people get a bit of value out of it.
Yeah. Wow. Guys, it's been so great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having us. Sorry if we derailed it a little bit with the sound effects.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode.
If you'd like to be a part of the artwork conversation, we would love to invite you to join our Artwork Community Facebook group, where you can connect with the artists we featured on the podcast and share your journey with a like-minded community. You can find the link in the show notes, as well as all the links to today's artist.
If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would take the time to subscribe to and review it, so that more people can find us in the future. Your comments can help us pop up on more people's suggested podcasts, helping our artist stories reach a wider audience.
Podcasts are best spread by word of mouth, so if you know people who might enjoy this episode or the Artwork podcast as a whole, we would love it if you told them all about it.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at art.workconversation.
And tune in next week for another inspiring episode.
Bye!
Bye.